Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about the Alfred Plea deal. And so, before we talk about this plea deal, there are a few things we have to discuss before we get into this actual plea deal and what's in the plea deal. As I said, I was taking a few weeks to actually make sure I understood what the Alfred Plea deal was, solely because when I think of a plea deal, and when others think of plea deals, they think of, okay, this guy is doing this, and what, the basics of, okay, so this guy's going to confess to a crime and basically what they're going to end up doing for this plea deal. Or when people think of a plea deal or somebody took a plea deal, they think of, okay, so this guy's going to testify against their associate or their co-defendant, which in normal plea deals, that is true. So let's talk about the differences between trials, plea deals, and this Gunna situation. This Gunna situation brought a lot to light, but it also showed that a lot of people don't exactly know what goes into a plea deal. So there are many things we have to account for. And so before I talk about this Alfred plea deal and the basics of how it got started, we're going to talk about in the center of Gunna. Okay, so this might be one of these longer episodes solely because there's a lot that goes into this Alfred plea deal and the reason why the Alfred plea deal is a thing. But there also, it's similarity to normal plea deals that people make. There are some differences between the plea deals, but for the most part, there's a story behind each plea deal. And so, as I said, I'm going to inform, but also evaluate, but also relate it to this Gunna situation of RICO charges. And so, RICO charges in this Gunna situation has brought to my attention for multiple different reasons, but it is the way in which you get a RICO charge is without a doubt is going to be interesting to me no matter what. But also, since YSL is in a RICO case, there are things that one of the things that kind of make sure I explain the situation well enough, even with the Gunna, situation that he's got a plea deal and rappers don't want to work with him because he basically snitched. Which this is going to be an interesting topic to discuss, but it has some loopholes in it, and I just want to address this. I want to have a conversation about these plea deals, and the most common way to talk about these plea deals are just do a podcast episode. So, with that being said, we're going to talk about these plea deals. Let's see what happens. We'll get right into the episode of these plea deals.
Atenção apaixonados por futebol. De Orlando a Los Angeles, entre em campo nos Estados Unidos nas suas próximas férias. Pronto para dar o pontapé inicial? Fique por dentro de jogos e eventos incríveis, além de encontrar tesouros escondidos em cidades cheias de aventuras, comida deliciosa e culturas diversas. Você vai gostar tanto que vai querer aumentar sua estadia além dos jogos. Marque um golaço na sua escapada futebolística. Acesse www.visiteosusa.com.br.
So the first case of an Alfred plea deal, an Alfred plea deal, and I'm talking about these RICO charges as well, but a RICO charge was known to put away mobsters. I think the most famous mobster that the RICO charges put away was John Gotti, which was the Don of the Gambino crime family. So this is an episode where it's more on the legal side and the risky side of things, which is weird. I think I don't know. There's things to talk about. So when we talk about an Alfred plea, we have to understand what an Alfred plea is, and where it originally took place. And so with those two questions in mind, I'm going to answer them. So the first time an Alfred plea was considered was North Carolina versus Alford in 1970. That is the case that made this statute a thing where people can plead guilty down to a charge, and get a lesser charge with a DA and would have been approved by a DA or attorney, and a prosecutor and a defense attorney. So I say this because I have a little bit of a criminal justice background history that I know of. So I will be using terms like defense attorneys, DAs, district attorneys. I'll be using a lot of criminal justice jargon when I talk about it, but there's things that we must talk about. But so an Alfred plea, and when most people go into Alfred pleas are for people that have like more than reasonable doubt. Reasonable doubt in certain situations is like above 50%. We understand that 60% that we are for sure that he was some part of this crime. And so with that, there weren't many cases that could kind of use that, could kind of like use certain crimes. Like same thing with the RICO charge. It couldn't charge everybody, and a RICO charge was to go after the mob because there weren't any charges or anything that could get other people. This Alfred plea deal was more of, hey, we know we're going to convict you. We have strong enough evidence to believe that you did this crime. So when you take this Alfred plea, and normally when you're in court, you have the ability to plead non-guilty, no contest, guilty, non-guilty. I think I'm missing one. But so it's interesting to me that we had an Alfred plea for years and people don't really know what an Alfred plea is. So basically what Gunna did, and I don't know what's actually in that deal that he signed, but it is, I'll give you the general basis. An Alfred plea deal is where there's more than enough evidence to prove that somebody was convicted of the crime, and the person normally takes this plea deal because it is less time. And so this is the thing. And so you hear him on a deposition saying that he was a part of YSL's labeler affiliate gang related activity or whatever activity they're a part of, right? So with that being said, he takes some accountability, which is part of that deal. So you give up the right for a trial, and you basically are guilty to the court, or you prove that you are guilty, and then it stays on your record because it still counts as a criminal conviction. So you don't get the jury or the jury appears and Miranda rights, but you're basically criminally convicted of a crime. It still is on your record. It can help in lawsuit for defamation, but I don't think YSL is in for defamation. They might be, but I don't think so. And only 3 states do not allow for an Alfred plea. Thankfully for Gunna, he's in a state where they accept Alfred pleas, because Alfred pleas and RICO charges go hand in hand. He was facing RICO charges with YSL, and YSL, from my knowledge, if they're facing the general anti-mafia RICO charges, most charges, I think one charge is 30 years. So if you get charged, the minimum for one charge is 30 years. So if you get charged for 3, that's 60. Give or take, they don't take some pity on you and give you like 30, 20. It's almost a life sentence no matter way you look at it. Because if you get it in your 30s, I think Gunna's 20 something. He might be 20 in his mid 20s or early 30s. So that's 30 years if you're looking at it. So can we argue and say that people are like, well, Gunna should have stuck with YSL? I guarantee, I can say with a promise that if somebody grants you an Alfred plea for a RICO charge, which if you get convicted on 2, that's 60 years, right? If you can get convicted on 1, that's 30. So you'll be 60 when you get out if you're 30. You'll be 50 something if you get out if you're 20. Like, those RICO charges are no joke. Now, we don't know what Gunna signed in that Alfred plea, because Alfred pleas are so kept secret for safety. And he said that, and there's rumor that he has to testify against Young Thug. However, if that plea deal doesn't say that he has to convict Thug on certain amount of crimes, or if it stipulates that they have to win over Young Thug, it depends on what the charges are. That's what I want to know what's in this plea deal, but I have no idea what's in this plea deal. And for people that are saying that, he snitched and he's not part of the culture, we have to remember that mafia culture and hip-hop culture run parallel for most of history. So it's weird, right? But then Gunna, believe it or not, he hasn't talked about the plea deal, but he might have a gag order on that plea deal where he can't publicly speak out about it. And so people are just assuming that, Gunna is a rat. And to some extent, I don't think we can argue he's a rat unless we know what's in that plea deal. Now, if somebody knows what's in that plea deal, please let me know, because I would like to know. I would love to know what's in that plea deal. I think if you give me if somebody, because I can't find it, but if somebody can find what's in that plea deal, I would love to have a conversation about what's in that particular plea deal. However, from the general knowledge of this plea deal, he pleaded guilty to whatever crime he pleaded guilty to. But that doesn't mean he's getting 30 years. He could get 20 and get out, get on parole, or get fined and be out on, be out. And I think to some understanding, that is great if you're an artist that, longevity in a career takes they'll say the longest you stay in a hip hop scene is 3 to 5 years. But that was in 1990. So 2000, I will say maybe you got a good 3 or 4, 5 years in hip hop, right? But then you look at Drake and we're like, well, he was a mixture of all genres and he lasted for a long time. So that's my huge concern with people talking about, well, he took a plea deal, he's a rat. Well, we don't know what's in that plea deal exactly. If that plea deal is just strictly Gunna, and Gunna pleads guilty, and he doesn't have to go against YSL, and he talks about specifically his involvement in YSL, that's not snitching on Gunna at all. If he says Gunna gave him the order, okay, but that's a RICO charge, right? Because organized crime, and we could argue that Gunna didn't pay the back end of a RICO charge for racketeering, and that's what I'm saying. People say that, oh, he snitched. Okay, we have to talk about that, because it's hard to tell me if you're not facing 30 years and you go, oh, he snitched, he's a rat. Well, let's see if you go 30 years. Let's see if they offer you 30 years on a RICO charge. If you get convicted on one, you get in life, right? And then you have to somehow keep it down. And we've argued this before. And a lot of people taking plea deals and whatever, because when everybody locked up and no one's making money, and you're the head honcho or whatever, people want money to be split certain ways. And you're basically buying people's silence, which you can't do for long. Because in RICO charges, they normally freeze assets. The only reason I know this is because they freeze John Gotti's assets when he was being convicted of a RICO charge. So this is strange to me. I think solely because if we don't know what's in our plea deal and we heard what he confessed to, and he said that he knew that YSL was a gang or something like that, and then we know all this, but we don't know what he got in return. Right? Is it solely based on if they convict Young Thug? Because if they base Young Thug, we don't know how Gunna's going to do on the stand and what he really says, right? Or if it's strictly facing Gunna and Gunna's like, oh, all I got to do is tell on myself and get less time from a RICO charge, I'm probably going to do it, right? Because Tekashi did the same thing. Now he got beat up, so there are lines that I'm not gonna cross because he did get beat up. So, but he was facing a RICO charge too, and it's when you face a RICO charge, and you didn't know that they was watching you for 5 to 6 years. A RICO charge is nothing to play with. It's just not. I think people in the rap industry are like, well, if you take a charge, if you really about that rap life or what you rap about, then you should stay on that merit. I don't know. Like, that merit is crazy. That merit isn't something you look at when you facing at the minimum 30 years. At the max, what, life? Because anything over 30 years is life. If you ask me, because 30 years plus 20, that's 50. And let's just say you make it to your 100 and something. That's not a life to live. Then you don't have any income. Then when you get out, that conviction is still on your record, and then you have to somehow, like, people saying that they wouldn't vote on a RICO charge. That is tough, because the 2 times I've seen people go and get RICO charges, somebody has always flipped, and it's solely because of the amount of years that somebody is facing. Like, if they're facing X amount of years, I think I understand why, right? So, we don't know what's in his Alfred plea that Gunna signed, but if it is strictly that Gunna tells on himself and is willing to plead down to a lesser charge, and the DA and attorney is going to plead for a lesser charge, I don't see why Gunna wouldn't take that. You don't want to be anywhere near a RICO charge or facing RICO charges. And I think Young Thug is realizing that if you don't want to be on the receiving end of RICO charges, because if your life can go in many different ways if you're facing a RICO charge. And the 2 places you don't want to face a RICO charge is New York City. And Georgia. Right? Like, you don't want to face RICO charges solely because RICO charges are the hardest. It is the hardest to defend against, because they take 4 or 5 years before you get into court, and they take it to the judge and they sign off on it. And RICO charges cost the state a lot of money to do. So if you're facing a RICO charge, you pretty much know at some point you're going to be in court defending yourself. Right? Like, if you go to court for a plea deal, and I think this is the thing. And we've heard from one jury say that a situation with Gunna and leaked situations. I haven't watched that situation, but she leaked information about the Young Thug case, and she lost her job because as a jury, you're not supposed to see any social media. You're not supposed to watch the news. And I don't think you're supposed to communicate with anybody outside the trial about what's going on in a charge, and especially a RICO charge. You do not understand the amount of time a RICO charge will carry. And so, especially if you're a juror of that charge, it's very hard to get past vendier, which is jury selection. So for you to get past jury selection and then to months into the trial mess up the prosecutor's case, I would hate to say it, but the person might get charged because you messed up a RICO charge, and RICO charges are not cheap. But that's what I wonder. So, because people saying he's not really about the culture and he lies in his music. That's hard for me to say that that's true. I think we'd have to look at what YSL is being charged with, each member, because I think it's a 50-page indictment on a bunch of crimes on a bunch of people and about a bunch of situations where they believe Young Thug is believed to be the enforcer or the don, or the don of seriously some serious crimes. Because a RICO isn't just like, oh, you got away with one aggravated assault. Like, that's a tricky thing. And as I said, I have no affiliation with any of these artists that I'm talking about, but a plea deal versus YSL is just, and we're getting more information as we go, but it's weird because I've seen plea deals before. I've seen them and heard and watched them before. So I keep trying to figure out if somebody's going to discuss what's in that plea deal. Gunna at this moment has not discussed what's in that plea deal, and that's probably for his safety. That's probably the right thing to do. It's probably the right way to handle it, because if they find out what's in that plea deal, and there's anything that has Young Thug in it, I think he's going to regret it, which is sad in itself. I think, no, cooperating with the police is frowned upon, but I don't know anybody in hip-hop that has faced a RICO charge and got away with it. I think there are very few people, there are very few organizations that get away with RICO charges and either live to tell it, because I think John Gotti would have gotten out, but I think he got killed in jail, either by a heart attack or by somebody. So it's weird to say, oh, well, he should have stuck with it like Bobby. Bobby stuck that out. Bobby Smurder took them charges and got, his Rowdy Rebel has run in less years, which I can understand that, if that is a situation that was discussed beforehand about a crime, I understand that. But it's very concerning to look at hip hop right now and people going, well, if you snitch or talk to the cops, or corroborate the cops, then you're a fed. Cool. We have to look at a few rappers then. There's a few rappers we have to look at, and solely because there's rumors that they did it, and until somebody can prove that they didn't or prove that they did, it'll be a long way to go, especially considering that the rules we are basing this culture off, hip-hop off of, are mob related, right? So when I say they're parallel, this is exactly what I mean. The anti-mafia law, called the RICO charge, was for the mob. The only people that they wanted to charge with was the mob. They charged luckily Ciani with that charge. They charged John Gotti with that charge. And that law is not too far gone. So to be the second face of that, to be the third or second face of that charge, or be associated with the second time that trial has ever existed, is difficult to go, you know what, I'm going to stick with my friends forever with a RICO charge. It's weird, because every time I hear a RICO charge, I go, ooh, because it's almost like, what did you do to get yourself in a RICO charge situation, right? Because you don't want, and people have always said this for years, they were like, if you think you're in the scope of a RICO charge, the best thing to do is run, right? So, and plus they had to have informants for this RICO charge. I think you at some point you have to have informants for it, because it's hard to make a RICO charge just off of assumed knowledge. It's extremely hard. So, do I think Gunna was right for taking a RICO charge? But doing it the way he did, truly, I don't know what's in a RICO charge. If I know what's in that Alfred Plea, specifically what's in there for Gunna, then I could argue it. But if we don't know what's in that actual RICO charge, how can we judge somebody for taking a plea when we don't know what's exactly in that plea deal? And it's rumored to be it's a rumor to be about testifying against Thug. It's rumored to be. It's not assumed to be. And this is a funny statistic, I think, solely because 99% of cases end in a plea deal. It's not what people talk about in their raps of, 100 of like 80% of charges go to court, 1% go to trial. 99 in the plea deals. So we could see Young Thug end up taking a plea deal himself, or some kind of arrangement so he doesn't have to go to trial for it. Like, it's weird to have this knowledge and then hear people talk about, oh, well, he's a rap for snitching. Do we know he snitched? Do we know what happened behind closed doors in that DA's office? I don't think so. Same way we don't know what happened with Tekashi, but Tekashi got a lot of people locked up afterwards, so we can only rumor what's in what they talked about, what the DA and the prosecutor talked about. But for this Gunna, we're not entirely sure. So I can't label him something that I don't know that's in his plea deal. Like, I could never call him a rat because I don't know what's in that plea deal. Everyone was locked up. Everyone was locked up and everybody was arraigned. And if knowing that 99% of cases end in deals, and 1% go to trial, it's hard to say that, Young Thug took a plea because it's publicized. So Young Thug is a celebrity, Gunna's a celebrity, so their cases are going to get more attention. But it's weird to look and go, a lot of people don't know a lot about the criminal justice system, especially when it comes to RICO charges and just deals in general. So, with that being said, it's a long ramble, but it is something that I am trying to keep people up to date with, but it does form a lot of questions for me personally, which I think somebody can answer soon, or if somebody leaks that plea deal. And I hope they don't, for Gunna's sake, because I don't wish any harm on anybody, but it is interesting for everybody to say, oh, he's a rat. I don't know. And I can't assume, because I don't like assuming that he is. What is your take on this topic? It's music adjacent, but it is more on the legal side this episode, and I'm sorry for that. If that is something you're very bored about, I am sorry, but it is something that when we look at these, this is something I talk about, this is something I worry about, because labeling somebody a rat is something they can't wipe off their skin. So if we're going to say they're a rat, I need proof, I need evidence, I need, there are things that I need. If there aren't tapes, because we don't know what Thug said to other people about Gunna, so this could just have been a argument between the two, and he decided to take an Alfred plea to get him out early. I am not entirely sure what's in his deal, and I don't like assuming, so I'm going to keep you updated, but there isn't any solid proof of evidence that they're asking Thug to testify. So I can't make my assumption.